Well, today's Monday, so of course we're heading for Donegal, the home county of Rory Gallagher and Daniel O'Donnell, and of course, Pat McGart. How are you, Pat?
I'm grand, Jude. It's to just check in with the weather. It's the sun shining out there. Just always like to get that on the record.
That's good. And Daniel O'Donnell is out there somewhere too, but not Rory Gallagher, alas, is no longer with us. I saw a program last night about him. Actually, he was included in Pat Short's. You know that music.
Music from the telly.
I had it, but I always wanted to really like Rory Gallagher, but I never quite could get into him.
No.
Remember when I was in Canada, the kids just loved him. Anyway, well, let's get down to business here. We've two major matters for discussion today, Pat. One is, the first one we'll look at is this one with New Zealand and the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. And she's got a lot of kudos for what they have done, because now the people of New Zealand, except things have changed inside the last week or something, are able to go to the beaches, they're able to go to parks, able to go to cafes, able to go to restaurants. They're even, the health minister has told them they can carefully hug each other if they want to. And she's done that. How has she done that?
Well, Jude, I looked up. Apparently, I'm open to the question, if it's something like 100 days with no deaths from COVID, right? Apparently, in early February, if I remember correctly, the first death was recorded outside China. The next day, I think it was some guy in the Philippines. The following day, I think it was about the 2nd or 3rd of February, that first death outside of China was recorded. The day after that first death, New Zealand introduced right away sort of anyone from China or coming to New Zealand via China had to isolate for 14 days. And then a couple of weeks later, they actually said anybody coming into the country, full stop, didn't matter whether you're from China or not, had to go self-isolate for 14 days. So they took it seriously from day one. And look at us, we are all over the shop. I have a friend who lives in Fanad in County Donegal, and I sent him on Saturday. He says, Pat, I don't know what's going on here, but he says the number of vehicles with British registrations and foreign registrations down here is simply phenomenal. He says, I've never seen anything like it. And he says, I take it they're coming in the back door because they're certainly not isolating. He says they're coming into Belfast either by plane or by boat and hiring them or taking them over or whatever it is, camper vans and motorhomes and all this sort of stuff. And he says they're coming in then to Donegal. So he says, it's like, we're supposed to have people coming into the country. We're supposed to have a green list that people, it's safe to go to these countries, but it's not safe. Like, Jude, that's an absolute joke. Nobody's following that. In fact, if you go down to, I was in Letterkenny yesterday, my eldest son lives there, and we were up visiting them. We came back last night. The traffic on the road, it was like, Piccadilly Circus, to use an expression. It was bung. Yeah. So, like, so much for the lockdown and so much for following the rules and all this sort of stuff.
Well, it's interesting that
what's your
New Zealand should have been so successful, because New Zealand is something like 5 million people, which is not an awful lot of difference between us, the island of Ireland, with 6 million or 6.5 million. So what was to prevent us doing what she did, where she put into quarantine anybody coming from China, she put into quarantine anybody coming from pretty well anywhere, and she had very strict rules within New Zealand where people could only go to the shops for food and or some other absolutely necessary journey. And when their health minister broke that rule by going for a 20-minute drive, he lost his job. So why
absolutely
what was the thing that stopped us doing the same thing, being so similar to New Zealand?
Yeah, Jude, now there's a couple of external factors. New Zealand is down in the deep south. It's not connected to any place like we are. It's not a member of the EU and free travel and all that sort of stuff. They don't have those sort of agreements. And they were able to enforce things pretty strictly because they are in control. One of the key factors, I'm sure it was one of the things about Britain, was this whole, when it came to Brexit, was this freedom of movement and all the rest of it. But having said that, those are all external factors. But what does seem to have happened is New Zealand had a prime minister who was willing to take the tough decisions, who was willing to do the unpopular thing and get it right. sure, when you listen to Boris Johnson and some of the stuff that he was coming out with, and so on, and you listen to Trump, like they're actually what would you say, disagreeing with the medical advice and trying to undermine it, and all this conspiracy theories, like it's coming from right across the Atlantic. Remember Trump's famous one, you could kill COVID with disinfectant. Well, you're supposed to drink the disinfectant. This sort of disparagement of the science for political reasons. Like Trump didn't want to shut down the economy because it was going to affect his re-election. That was what his primary concern was, and that's come across Britain pretty much the same.
Your sound is a little bit off, but anyway, I'll just go on. I wonder to what extent is it that we were not following one rule for the entire island, or is it that the rules in Britain and the rules in the Republic of Ireland weren't sufficiently strong and harsh even in order to restrain this virus? Is it we're a divided island? Was that the problem? Or was it just simply that both jurisdictions weren't really sufficiently strict in terms of movement and people coming in?
I think it's a bit of both, Jude. I really do. Because in the Republic, we were supposed to have a green list. But if you come in through Belfast, that was just simply overruled. You could come into Belfast, come into Donegal, Derry, or any place you wanted in the Republic, and just totally on the green list. It was safe to go there and come back. And on the non-green list, you were supposed to isolate for 14 days. Well, sure, nobody's paying any attention to that.
Why surely here? We said that early on the Prime Minister of New Zealand acted and laid in place these regulations, harsh regulations even. What was there to prevent Arlene Foster and Leo or Mihal, or whoever was the Taoiseach at the time, from coming together and saying, let's do these regulations in common? They did have the power to do that, didn't they? I mean, the North
absolutely.
Didn't have to follow the rules that Britain laid down. In fact, has its own rules. Why in God's name didn't the two of them, in the name of people's lives, come together, set in place or set in motion strict regulations, and we'd be in a happy state now that New Zealand is in? You were saying this because we're part of the EU and so on, but both jurisdictions in the island of Ireland had the power to have the same kind of lockdown that Jacinda Ardern had in New Zealand.
Yeah, well, your point is, I can't argue with that point. But what strikes me is there were more rules for foot and mouth, and there were guardy on the border down there, and or PSNA or RUC at that time were on the other side. They were stopping every vehicle. They were stopping all the rest, and they had hygiene baths at the border and all that sort of stuff. And you couldn't cross. When it came to COVID, none of this was in place. And it seems to me that there's also this thing. The divided island thing definitely played a part, Jude, because for a long time I got the impression Arlene didn't want to be seen to be in lockstep with the Republic, because that would mean it was an all-island thing. And, right now, in the middle of Brexit and all the rest, I think some of the unionist people leaders are very concerned about appearing to be pro anything to do with an all-island approach.
Well, leave aside the fact that you didn't have the exact, and they should have had, I believe, the exact same system in the north and in the south. Do you think the regulations in the south were sufficiently strict? Would they have been comparable even?
I don't know, Jude. No, definitely. No, what's I don't think the government in Dublin had the wherewithal or the balls, to put it in parlance, to actually go for it. They really should have locked down big time at the start. They were trying to, some of the stuff, Jude, was ridiculous. If you come into Dublin, I'm repeating myself, but if you come into Dublin, you flew in, there's 200,000 people came in, I think was it last month, into Dublin airport. One of the flights was from Texas, from Dallas. And Dallas had the highest rate the week before of COVID in America. And they flew into Dublin. And there was no isolation or no nothing. And these people were allowed to, get a shot of that. And isn't that lovely? And all that, down in Kerry and all the rest of it. So apparently today, and I'm not standing over this, but apparently our rate today could be higher than that of Britain. And a couple of months ago, we were actually a lot lower. So something's gone wrong.
I mean, it would be, you know, you could sort of smile at it for the incompetence of it, but since it's a life and death thing, it's really very worrying. Let's go back to New Zealand again and just give the negative side of that. There are people who are saying that, you know, the kind of lockdown she went into, Ardern, the Prime Minister, was maybe even illegal. That she imposed restrictions that, according strictly to the law, she shouldn't have been doing. And that that was part of an authoritarian sort of attitude among leaders throughout the world now. Does that seem a reasonable charge to you, Pat? Or
Jude, look, the conspiracy theorists are out there. They are everywhere. This is a big master plan to take over the world, and it's this pandemic all around. Like, I don't buy this for a second. Look, this is a pandemic. If you read anything at all about the Spanish flu, it devastated the world. One of the reasons this thing has been reasonably well contained, and I mean reasonably, I don't mean wonderfully well, is the fact that we have followed rules, we have socially isolated, we have washed our hands, we have worn masks and all the rest of it. You know, I think New Zealand, they did what was right. Look, they're reaping the benefits of this now, Jude. Their society has opened back up again. You know, there was a lockdown for a good and genuine reason, and it worked, and it's back to normal. So where's the big problem?
Well, you see, I think at the time that they were considering lockdown, I gather Britain anyway, whatever about the South, was fearful that people would, if you kept them locked down for too long, they would start just walking out of their homes and, you know, breaking all the rules, and it would be terrible. So they claimed you had to time the lockdown for the very, not the earliest point, but the latest possible point, which I think is rubbish, because I tell you, you can lock me down as long as you like, but if I have to choose between leaving my house and maybe dying, or staying in my house and reducing the chances of that happening to zero, I'll stay in my house for the next 6 months. And I'm sure
I think
people
mostly,
would say the same thing.
Exactly, you're ahead of me. Most reasonable people would say, "Look, wait a minute. This is not funny." Like, Jude, I know at least 3 or 4 people who have had this. One is a well-known figure in the media locally, had it for 14 weeks and said it was no joke. One is a well-known public representative here who was, very, very ill for quite a while. There's a young fellow up the road there or his parents are up the road. He was on a ventilator for something like 29 days. Like, this is not funny. You know, this is not a light flu. This is something deadly serious. Jude, you know, when they had to bring in the army in Italy to bury the dead, when they had to move people off to an island off Manhattan to bury them there, when when 800 and 900 people a day were dying in Spain, this is not something to be dismissed, you know, as of no account.
Well, some people are saying actually that it's very interesting that some are saying it's authoritarian on the Prime Minister of New Zealand's part to have done such a strict lockdown, maybe illegally. But others are saying it's like a laboratory test. It's like a test case of a nation coming through lockdown out the other side. So now what will the consequences be to the economy, to trade, to all sorts of things? So they're saying, you know, will New Zealand be seen as isolationist then? Or will it continue to be part of the global sort of interaction? And they're wondering what effect it'll have. Incidentally, one last thing on what you were saying about this thing not being any joke. You're mentioning some of the people you know. I heard a thing today where they said, this thing stays with you. People who have had it and recovered are still 14, 15 weeks later, they're still out of breath after walking 100 yards. They get tired very easily. Some of them suffer from a sore throat, cough. Really, that seems to me the really worrying part, that even reasonably fit people who come through it and out the other side, they're still stuck with this maybe lasting health problem.
Richard, to answer your question, if you give me the choice between New Zealand's approach and what went on in America, I'll take New Zealand's every time.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, well, let's leave New Zealand for a moment. It does sound a really interesting case. But I must say the notion of a country where people can act normally where they can, go and shake hands, where they can go and
I go back
hug,
again,
and go to the beach and go to rest. It seems like dreamland, compared to it is
Because
dreamland.
they took the tough decisions, the unpopular decisions, and the right decisions.
Yeah.
Everybody's over here trying to play politics.
I think so. Okay, let's come to a very maybe political matter and maybe just an academic matter. It is this notion of a cross-border university in the Northwest, linking Derry, Letterkenny, and what was the third? Sligo. Now, there's a TD, I've forgotten his name now.
Colin O'Rourke or Colin Burke.
Is it O'Rourke? Yeah.
I think it's O'Rourke.
Whatever. He has come out and said that he thinks it'd be a very good idea. Now, we know it's not something new, but how good an idea do you think it is, Pat? And why do you think it? I'm assuming you would think it is a good idea.
Jude, I am totally, utterly, and completely, I've got maybe those words in the wrong order, in favour of this. Derry has been waiting for 60 years for a proper university. John Hume started off, and it's been, that particular story's been kicked to death following, his passing. But that's what got him into the public life at the start, and it still hasn't happened. Derry deserves a proper university, and the corridor between Letterkenny and Derry is the vital one. Donegal is Derry's natural hinterland and vice versa. People in Derry don't even think Donegal's a strange country. They don't even see the border. Like, everybody's over and back all day long, So here's a place, traditional, a very lot of young people. Most of them have to go to Belfast or Dublin or further afield to get educated. They could have a university. It could be a thriving university if it was properly funded, properly looked at, properly. Jude, there was a Tip O'Neill chair of politics up there, peace and reconciliation studies, set up to honour Hume and Tip O'Neill at McGee. It's been moved to Belfast. Where was the consultation with the people of Derry about that? And so on. What's happening? Derry has been systematically robbed. The number of courses that have been shifted from McGee. McGee now is some sort of adjunct, an afterthought. It's not a university in name. And I think until Dublin gets really serious about this, and I think the goodwill, if the Dublin government got its finger out and said, right, we will go with this proposal, Letterkenny, Derry, Sligo, have a look at it, particularly Letterkenny, Derry. That's the one I would be most in favour of. I'm not so sure about Sligo, but I wouldn't certainly rule it out. But I've looked at the thing. And by the way, there's a guy called Garvin Downey who deserves a massive amount of respect. He's done a lot of work on it, and he's got all the facts and the figures. He actually ran for the Irish Senate on this very issue some time ago. And here, Jude, look at all the benefits. A university, a proper functioning university, brings research, it brings employment, it brings opportunity, it educates the people, and there's so much more that comes with that. And then we could have I don't even know, Jude, what's your opinion of it? Just I'm doing all the talking.
I'd echo every single word you said. When I was working for what was then the University of Ulster, we used to have sometimes go up to McGee and give courses there, and we used to have an out centre in Strabane. Now, when we were offering these part-time degrees in the evening for teachers, we always had a considerable number of teachers from across the border, sometimes as far as Letterkenny, sometimes even as far as Sligo, who would come drive in the evening to Derry or to Strabane to do the course. So, I mean, without any formal structures being put in place, there's an appetite for that. There's a need for it. So as you say, it's a natural sort of centre for the hinterland that extends all the way to Donegal, Letterkenny, and on down to Sligo. So it really does seem to me so obvious that they should get this thing in place. The other thing is, of course, as you say, it's jobs. It's two things, I think. One is jobs. There's jobs for, obviously, the lecturers, the administrative staff. There's all the jobs that go with keeping the place running, the technical staff, the cleaners, the people who provide the canteen with food, run the canteen. There's a whole lot of stuff. And I'll give you an example of how important that is and why certain universities replace certain places. Jordanstown, is where I did most of my teaching. I think what was the Ulster Poly and is now the University of Ulster. I do not think it was a mistake that Jordanstown lay not too far from Carrickfergus, which was an overwhelmingly Protestant or Unionist town, and not too far from Rathcoole, which is one of the biggest Unionist working class areas in the north. So they tended to place, well, it goes right back to this famous case of it being placed in the university, the new university, back in the early 60s, being placed in Coleraine as distinct from Derry. I remember it so well. I have a brother-in-law who, was a very mild-mannered man, and he wouldn't ever get involved in politics. But he joined thousands of others in a car cavalcade up to Stormont to protest this. Now that did two things. One, it didn't work. They still put it in Coleraine because they knew Coleraine was something like 6-1 Unionist or Protestant. It didn't work, but it also gave people a sense of flexing their united muscles, the minority.
Yeah.
And as a result, you had eventually the civil rights movement and so on. So it was, if you like, they lost that battle, but maybe they won the war, or they started on a series of battles that were even more important. But I couldn't agree with you more. People talk about good relationships between North and South. Well, let's see it in action. Let's see it in action. Let's see an institution which seamlessly provides for both sides of the coin. Or am I being too you see, if I were a unionist, maybe I'd be saying, you would say that, wouldn't you? What you really want is to weaken the border, and you're trying to sort of slide us into a united Ireland. Would that be
Jude, with the greatest respect, I would tell that unionist to go take a good rum to himself for a very simple reason. Derry's been waiting for 60 years from this. It's not as if it's undeserving. This is crumbs from the table. The big money has been spent on Queens, on Jordanstown and Coleraine. Are the people of Derry some sort of second-class citizens that they have to wait for a sort of the hind type thing? Derry has been very, very badly treated. By the way, Jude, there's another thing just struck me. When Brexit happens and all these people in the north are outside the EU, a university that's an all-Ireland university, cross-border university, might be a very useful thing for a lot of people living in Northern Ireland, that they could come along and maybe funded by the Irish government. And I would also presume, just to digress further, if this was set up, you can imagine the goodwill of the Americans and Hume's friends across the world. I would think there'd be numerous people across the world who would be more than willing, including the EU, to help fund this. So this is not some pie in the sky. If Dublin really got behind this, if our politicians got behind it, we could make this happen.
Well, just two things very quickly. One is, I know from working with students how the social aspect of things is at least as important and probably more important than the academic side of things. In other words, when they go for their lunch or they go for their break in the where you're working with them, talking to each other and forming sort of relationships and friendships, that's at least as important to them as they're getting their degree. Now, if you had a university which was straddling the border, I think it would be very, very good for Northerners to know more and going into class more and more with people from the Donegal and from down as far as Sligo, and the other way around. The Irish people are very insular in all sorts of ways. We're quite parochial. And as a result, we tend to think in two small circles. If you could have a university straddling the border, you would see then in miniature how good it would be for the Irish people who were unionists or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole idea is actually a very good one. It would bring so many benefits. It would help so many people. Derry has one of the youngest populations in Europe. It's an absolutely beautiful city. And by the way, I can say it as a Donegal man. The social Derry people, by and large, they're wonderful singers. They're wonderful musicians. There's a whole atmosphere. It could be the Galway of the Northwest, and there's no reason. But there's a Dr. Peter Dorna I saw came in on our Facebook thing, and he said it's time the people of the Northwest stopped asking for permission. We should go ahead and do it.
Well, here's we'll have to finish with this part because we're running over time. What should be done, say, inside the next 2 months? that would further, in some kind of real way, the possibility of that cross-border university coming into existence?
I would say
what practical
someone like
steps?
I'm just about to answer that, Dr. Collins. Garvin Downey would be, in my opinion, an ideal guy. He's been to the forefront. Why doesn't Garvin call a public meeting, ask the public? You know, it needs to be wider than just the SDLP. It needs to be wider than just the human people. It needs to be the Dublin government, the Northern administration. It needs to be the politicians, north and south. It needs to be civil society, civic society, whatever you want to call it. And people really get behind it. They should do it. I think Garvin, I'm pushing for Garvin. Maybe somebody else has got a different idea. But someone like that who's been committed for 10 years for this, I think he should actually call a public meeting and see what's out there and sort of say, right, let's go for it.
Well, okay, I'll tell you what I think they should do. I think that's too ambitious at the moment. I would start with something like, remember the famous meeting in the Waterfront Hall in terms of civic nationalism, where you had non-party people, non-political, but just ordinary people, many of them middle class, actually, who came to there and they said, look, we care about this. This matters to us. I tell you, that made a lot of people sit up and take notice. I think if Derry was to do the same thing, or the area in Donegal, about the Sligo, if people were to come together, and there's a number of those, and sign a petition, which would, maybe could be going to the tens of thousands, and present that to the Minister of Education in the South, Minister of Education in the North. I think that would move it into the practical realm. The danger, I always think,
all right, Jude, what about a meeting in Derry, a meeting in Letterkenny, and a meeting in Sligo?
Well, whatever. But make sure that something comes out of it. When people come to it, ask them, will they sign a petition or something? I am a great believer in petitions, actually. If there's enough names on a petition, it puts terrible pressure. It really does put serious pressure on those people who put their hands on the levers, because those are votes, and they don't. The very thought that might end up in them not having a seat. Bad news, Right, Pat, we'll have to stop there because we could go on all day.
I'll actually agree with you on that one, Jude.
Okay.
Right, Jude.
Okay, Pat, thanks very much.